Okay, this video will be about autism. This is not exactly full-on debate video because this is more of my experiences and how I feel towards doctors and places that should be responsible for people with autism, especially at an early age. Children that should be tested earlier or be supported more. Definitely, I don't know how to explain this. I always had autism. I'm pretty sure I was born with it. I mean, I was a weird child. I mean, I went through a very chaotic and pretty messed up childhood. I was just weird myself. I will not exclude my childhood or my past experiences from my development as a person because I do believe in the theory that everything that happens to you makes you who you are, at least when you allow it to make it, or like the saying, you are what you eat, you are what you say, things like that. So autism is a pretty interesting thing. It's been around for probably forever since humans have disorders. It has a whole spectrum, like most things. We realize that autism is a lot more complex than people let on. It's not the stereotypes. Stereotypes are usually just the easy way out to have some sort of way or some sort of view of some situation on a person without it actually being true necessarily. Autism is one of those. A lot of people say a lot of things about autism, like we are either very smart kids or we're just weird and antisocial, or we none of us can make eye contact, or none of us like loud noises, or we start flapping our hands and stuff like that. But yeah, some people do have that, or have those mannerisms and those things like sensitivities. But others are more susceptible to it than others. Like I really am susceptible to touch, textures, loud noises, but I don't flap my hands, and I can somewhat hold eye contact and be social to enough people that I trust. But I also have trust issues, and it has nothing to do with autism necessarily. So, and I mean, autism usually is combined with other disorders, which makes it even more complex than it already is. And they also say like people with autism, they think out of the box, which is usually true, or we are very fixated on things and we want things to go correctly. Some of us have it more than others, of course, but in my school, as well as my nephew and I, we always wanted things to be perfect. Nobody could interrupt us or wasn't allowed to interrupt us. Like if we were thinking about something, we wanted to do it, and we wanted to win, we wanted to succeed, and whenever it fails, oh boy, that is an interesting one. I mean, when my parents had issues, and even when I was at my grandma for a while because my mom couldn't take care of me because of a troubled childhood. Even my grandmother tried her best to take care of me, but she did it in, not to sound mean because she passed on, but it was in a mainly superficial way. It was always about like, okay, she did take care of me, like hygiene, and she made sure my hair was cut and my teeth were brushed, and that I had school and I had play toys and a console to play on and good clothes. But at the end of the day, she kind of forgot that I had severe depression, or maybe she didn't know, but she did not know how to handle it, and she did not. Well, at some point, she did bring me, also partially my mom, as it was an agreement by, I think it was a psychiatrist or pediatrician, I don't know, but they did advise me to go to like a sort of test, to find out what was wrong with me. And actually, already from that early point, when I was, I think, 10 or something, they did notice things about me, that were off, the way I thought, the way I perceived things, and yet they never mentioned it as autism fully until I went back 10 years later on my own into the same institution by accident. And then when I put up my file after doing another test, I actually got to hear that I got autism. It took them more than 10 years for me, and I've been around places, around doctors and psychiatrists by accident, or just because my parents went there for one moment because I thought I had an insane obsession with the internet, and that was the only reason why I was antisocial and never did the dishes or never went downstairs. Well, the actual problem was me having severe depression, but apparently even the fucking psychiatrist didn't care. He was just sitting there and he agreed to my parents' statements, and he just let us go back home, and the fight just continued. My parents started yelling at me again. It was like, yeah, see, you're always on the internet, and that's why, and you're just a teenager with hormones, and yeah, well, the actual problem was my depression and my parents having an alcohol problem and financial issues. But life, right? So again, like when it comes to testing and medicating children or people, it's either too much or too little. I've noticed in Belgium at least, but I think it's if it's here, then it's gonna be anywhere. Sometimes you have to wait years or months to get on the list to get therapy alone, and then sometimes you have to like we get a lot of financial aid here, but still you need to like have you need to be under all the criteria, and it's a lot of different criteria in order to get financial aid first, and it can take months of paperwork and months of or weeks of waiting and confusing moments where the administration is makes a dumb mistake again, or the papers get lost, or even the computer gets hacked or some bullshit like that, and it's that alone, it just makes things just awful. Like if I didn't do another test just to find out anything I have, from attachment disorder to ADHD to autism, then I would have been struggling more, because then it's like sometimes it's not necessarily stereotypes, but just having a label or a name to what you are or what you're struggling with does something to you. It makes you feel known or understood or less lost, I guess, less in a limbo state. And but at the same time, you kind of base your life onto it, sometimes by accident. As it's the same with like any label. It's not like you want the attention necessarily. You just want to be understood and have support, and not be like forced in a corner whenever it comes down to it. Like let's say you go to an institution again or rehab for something, and they discover you have a disorder, and they say, well, that's why, and they're just gonna medicate you and put you in that box, like, oh yeah, that's because of that reason, and you didn't even have a say in it, or and even if you do have a say, they just kick you out, and they're like, you know what, go just go home. You're criticizing us, just go. I've had it happen before. I criticized an institution and they literally just never allow me back in. Not even 3 4 years later, when I have a file up with every disorder that I have, which is so far three. Maybe my gender dysphoria does count as it. Some people see it as a disorder, others don't. I see it like disorder at moments, but yeah, I don't know. So even that alone, like they just don't want to help me anymore, and I was like, okay, you know what, I'll find help somewhere else. I do have therapy. Thing is, therapy or not, you just have to be able to communicate with someone, because even if you're antisocial, locking yourself up in a room every day and just forcing everything down, like your emotions, your fears, just not, it's always gonna get worse. That's what happened to me, and then eventually I had to find help. And some people are proud of me, some people are like, oh, see, you should have done that ages ago, and blah blah blah. But I was at home with my parents, and my parents were poor, and they avoid doctors like the plague. There's a lot of disorders in our families actually, and not even half of it is known. Like there's probably a lot of bad diseases in my family as well that I don't even know of, like cancers, or I had two aunts with cancers, not one aunt with cancer, one grandma with cancer, but it's probably a lot more. Like some people have tendency to have cancer. It's not nice, especially when your own family doesn't even, even if your own family doesn't even understand you. Like my aunt, for instance, she has borderline disorder, and apparently she says that people like her cannot get along with people with autism, and I think I know why now. I mean, sometimes we got into arguments and they got out of hand really badly. I always had to have a last say. She always had to have a last say, and it's not a good thing. She would break out in anger, and I would break out in panic attacks. So I mean, come on. But that's the thing. Sometimes even people with the same disorder, you're not always on the same page. I've had to come to terms with that, I guess. There's sometimes moments when I just feel lonely again, because there's a lot of people with autism that don't agree with, or their view of disorders is a lot different than mine. And I do have a lot of friends with autism, or at least I've met a lot of people with autism, and at work as well. There's people with tons of different physical and mental issues. So it's at this point, it's just normal. It's just a new normal. I don't think normal is ever a real thing, but I've heard that autism pairs a lot with like ADHD, and that some people say that autistic people have more tendency on transgender. So of course, when I realized I was or had autism, I had to just discuss this with my gender therapist, because you never know. And like also have to exclude psychosis, which I don't have, to make sure that I'm actually like sure and what I want. It took me over like 20 years, basically from birth, to realize I was trans or am trans, and that I don't feel at home being a woman. And of course, I had different perceptions of what a woman is and a man, but I just feel more happy to be a man or feminine man than rather than a masculine woman, if that makes any sense. It just feels fine. It just makes sense. Now, of course, it doesn't fix other problems, but it does. Every little thing helps. And the thing for autism is you're gonna have it for the rest of your life. There's not actual medication for it except for things for anxiety or learning how to control yourself or behave in certain situations. Like, let's say you want to talk about something, you have to like understand patience and communication, like let the other person talk as well. And sometimes people don't follow you with what you're saying, and then you have to either repeat yourself or you just have to change the topic. There's a lot of things, but it's usually always the best to learn this from childhood, because that could have prevented a lot of things, a lot of hurdles. Maybe I could have finished school more properly. Who knows? That's all I guess I can say about my autism. It's just what it is. That's also why I don't look in the camera. I still don't. I just don't feel comfortable looking into a lens, and that's why this is one of the best ways for me to communicate, I guess. But I'm gonna have to end it, or I'm gonna have so much editing to do, and trust me, this alone takes 2 hours. Just to end it off, if you notice that your child is behaving strangely, don't disregard it. You don't have to put them under medication or under strict regime or like in a hospital necessarily full of therapists. But just if your child isn't happy, any way that concerns you, just, don't let it just be nothing. See if maybe there's actually something wrong. Because children, their feelings matter as much as that from an adult. Oh god, I also need to add another thing, that yes, autism can be genetic, and yes, it can be more common within parents or at least mothers. And basically during the development, being in the womb, let's say the parent smokes a lot, or she takes drugs, or she has a very bad health, that sometimes there can be like, you couldn't compare to an electrical surge in the womb, causing all sorts of disorders like gender dysphoria, actually even gender dysphoria and depression, chronic depression, autism. You kind of look it up yourself, but it's pretty interesting and also pretty much informative in case you ever decide to have a child of your own.